Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hiba Youssef.
Great talent wants to win. Like if you're a great talent, you want to be on a team that's winning and you want to grow. Like those are the two essential things in my mind to keeping great talent. So you need great talent to win, and you keep great talent if you're winning and they feel like they're growing. And none of that happens if you're not actively building high-performing cultures where you're pushing people, where you're, of course, telling people what they're doing well, but you're also really working hard to help them see where they can grow and where they can improve at the same time.
Managing people shouldn't feel like you're juggling while you're blindfolded. Lattice can help as your all-in-one HR platform that scales with your business and keeps everyone happy. It's the best of both worlds, stellar people programs and a modern HRIS all-in-one. With Lattice, you can really have it all. No trade-offs, no regrets. Multi-state compliance is a nightmare, but 650 makes it easy. Get instant questions to employment law questions, generate a compliant multi-state handbook in minutes, and stay ahead of changing laws with automated updates. Visit SIXFIFTY.com to learn more. That's 650.com. Another episode of your favorite podcast, What a Time to Be Alive. This season, it's all about what employees really want. Every guest will provide their take on what your employees are hoping and dreaming for. And today, we're going to talk about employees just wanting to know where they stand. And joining me to dig into this topic is Jessica DeVlieger. Jessica is a relationship-driven leader who believes authentic connections are a brand's greatest competitive advantage. She scaled a 10 million startup into a global agency, led customer strategy programs for Fortune 500 companies, and is currently the CEO at Encompass Labs. Some of her career highlights include at C-Space, she oversaw 10 straight years of top and bottom line growth, reinvented an agency that was a disruptor and then was disrupted. And at Encompass, she's jump-started growth with over a 300% increase in customers during her first year as CEO. Jessica's superpower is helping people and organizations see themselves more clearly, inspiring aligned actions and lasting impact. Whether building teams or gathering people around a table, she leads with heart, clarity, and connection. Jessica, welcome to the pod.
Thanks. It's so great to be here.
We just met in person for the first time last week.
Yes.
So we were at a
I feel like I know you, though.
Yeah,
I feel like
for
I know
sure.
You.
Yeah. I feel like most people, it's really funny. Sometimes I ask people when they meet me in person, does my online presence like match up to what you meet in person? And almost every single person is like, yep.
Totally.
Yep, we expect you to behave like this. Well, today's topic is super juicy. We're going to talk about employees just wanting to know where they stand. But before we get to that, I've been asking every guest this season, what's one truth about work that you wish more leaders understood?
All right, I'm going to stay on the tack of performance management because that seems to be the theme and like know where you stand. What I say to CEOs all the time is that employees know who the high performers and low performers are way before senior leadership does. Just take a minute to think about that. Employees that are out in the field, they know so clearly like who's really killing it, who's doing the job, and who's slacking off. And they're just sitting around waiting to see how long it's going to take leaders to catch on to the trick.
Wow. I mean, I'm thinking about that in like every single one of my jobs. Yeah, there's always been that one person where I'm like, what do you do all day long?
And the employees see it and know it. And then again, the way performance management works, there's all these layers and blockers. So it takes for a long time for senior leaders to catch on to a lot of that stuff. And it is like the fastest way to drive disengagement is to not actually recognize the people that are killing it and the people that are pulling the company down and do something about it. Fastest way.
Okay, well, we're going to get more into that too, because today we're going to talk about employees trying to understand, like they just want to know where they stand, right? I guess like your top performers want to know they're top performers and your bottom performers probably want to know how they can get better. Mm-hmm. So why do you think employees still struggle to get clarity on where they stand, even in companies that have structured performance reviews?
A few reasons. I think first and foremost is humans are really bad at it. We're terrible at it. We're bad at assessing people because we bring our biases and beliefs and baggage to anything. And second, we're bad at it because giving constructive feedback is not something that most people are very comfortable with. Like, I'll be nice all day, but then if I need to actually give someone feedback, it's really hard. And so that alone leaves a huge amount of stuff up for people's imagination to guess where they stand. I think then the additional contributing factors are remote work, hybrid work, and cross-functional teams are new contributing factors that are just driving lack of understanding about where I stand to the next extreme. So we're bad at it, and now that the way the work is set up is making us even worse at it.
I feel that so deeply in my soul because it's like sometimes I have to tell my direct reports, like, you are performing well. I just like have to say the statement out loud because if I forget to say it, like, I'm going to assume that they don't know. I just always assume that people don't know where they stand.
Yeah. And it's as much about telling people when they're doing really great as it is about when giving them feedback they don't want to hear.
Yeah. I've been thinking about feedback a lot lately about like how it's not an instinctive, like natural thing we do. And I was like thinking about my childhood, like growing up, school, like there's not a course on how to give feedback. And we as humans don't want to like upset each other, right?
Right. Have uncomfortable conversations. And it is a really cultural thing too. I think the way that people are raised in their family and the experiences that they have shape so much the way that they're how good they are at taking feedback and also how good they are at giving feedback, because it's an art of hearing and receiving feedback as much as giving it.
Yeah, it's hard. And I don't think it comes
It's
naturally.
hard.
I don't think it comes naturally to a lot of people, honestly. I'm like, I have not met somebody who's like, I'm so good at giving and receiving feedback.
Yeah, I love it. I love all of it.
I mean, I say I love getting feedback, but I have like conditioned myself, like as if I'm in the gym when I know I'm getting feedback. I know my first reaction is to be defensive. Like that is human nature to like have someone tell you something critical about yourself. You're going to instantly think, no, that's not true. And so when I feel that wall going up in my head, I almost have to like remind myself like brick by brick to take it down because I'm like, I just need to receive what the person is saying. I can internalize it and sit with it and think about it later, but like I still have to be able to receive it. And I think that's just a hard part for humans in general to have to hear like you're not doing a good job is really hard.
And I also think the thing about feedback is that it's someone else's truth.
Mm.
And you can choose what part of that truth you want to make your truth or not.
Yep.
And I think that's really also empowering. And how do you hear it and like, make the other person feel heard because it is their truth, but know that it doesn't need to be the end of your life if you hear something terrible. Like it doesn't need to be the worst thing that's ever happened to you. You can choose you can choose what you want to take.
Yeah, I think I told you this story in person maybe where my CEO slacked me some feedback and I said, thanks for sharing. 1, I accept this feedback. 2, I challenge this feedback.
There you go.
He was like, okay. And I was like, I'll accept it. Like, I will accept that that is what your impression was, but I'm going to challenge the piece of it that I think is not exactly spot on. And it's not a way to like not take accountability because I do think his feedback was valid, but I did challenge parts of it where I was like, that's really hard for you to understand X, Y, and Z. And, you're like reading an intention, but you can't read everyone's intentions. And that's just a different experience. So, I mean, I think
it sounds like you must have a lot of trust with your CEO, which is the beginning of getting feedback right. Truly, that's awesome.
We've built it.
It's great.
It's taken time, but we have done a good job, and we've really gotten there. So, I think one of the earliest stories you told me when we first met was about like your role as CEO and what the work you do with companies and how performance focused you've been. Like, I feel like you've always been this performance focused CEO. Like, where did that come from, and how has it evolved as your team has grown? Because I think performance is so hard.
Yeah. So I think when I first started in my career, I thought that like good managers made their employees feel good.
Mm.
And I feel like what I've learned as I've gotten more responsibility and led teams is that, well, first of all, your talent is all you've got at the end of the day. Like if you've got great talent, you're going to win. And great talent wants feedback. Great talent wants to win. Like if you're great talent, you want to be on a team that's winning and you want to grow. Like those are the 2 essential things in my mind to keeping great talent. So you need great talent to win, and you keep great talent if you're winning and they feel like they're growing. And none of that happens if you're not actively building high performing cultures where you're pushing people, where you're, of course, telling people what they're doing well, but you're also really working hard to help them see where they can grow and where they can improve at the same time. So it really came from a place of necessity. Like, I needed good talent to win. And then to keep good talent, you need to help them feel like they're winning and growing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I don't know if you've seen Billions, but in Billions, Wendy is like a performance coach.
Mm,
And I think about that job so much because I'm like, that is often seen as like the CEO's focus is like, how do you make people perform well?
mm,
But then I think the other piece of it that might be slightly controversial is I also think it's a huge HR responsibility.
completely.
Like we should be constantly looking at are the systems and things we have in place creating a barrier to letting people perform, or
Yeah.
is it empowering them to let it perform?
Yeah. I love that. The HR is a critical partner in retaining great talent, retaining and growing great talent.
But I also think it has to come from the CEO too. Like I love that you as a CEO, that was your focus because you knew the company is only going to be as successful as our talent is great.
Correct.
That's lost on some
Yeah.
CEOs.
And you only keep great talent if you're ready to help them grow and
Yeah.
that you're winning. Like, you're not winning, you're not going to keep great talent.
Definitely not. And I think the other piece of it from the HR perspective is too, a lot of us think like, okay, like we're trying to get people to perform, so we're going to do performance management. But like,
Mhm.
I have a lot of thoughts about that. I want to know from you, like, what are some signals that you saw that told you the traditional approach to performance management actually doesn't work?
Right, so I'm going to get in the Wayback Machine and I'll tell you a story that like is still seared in my brain about the pain of performance management. So I was probably like a mid-level manager. I think maybe I got invited to my first ever calibration session, which was so exciting. I'm in the room, I'm doing
Love it.
calibration. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Oh man, did that dream get crushed quickly as soon as I got in there and experienced it. But I'll tell you one example of what came out of that was I went into the room thinking this guy who was on the team of one of my peers like had to be fired. He was terrible. Again, this is like the how do you get those signals up to senior leadership? This
Yeah.
painful calibration process is one of those ways, right? And we've all been there. Everyone's got an agenda. Everyone's like, how do I pump up my team? Those stories I wanted to. So I went in there. I thought this guy who was the employee of one of my peers, like he had to be fired, at least put on a performance management plan. When we left the room, he'd been promoted.
Stop.
And I was like, wow, I guess that person's a way better salesperson than I am.
Promoted?
Promoted, not fired.
Oh my God.
That is just because that is traditional performance management is you've got one voice representing the people that you're representing, and it comes down to like how good a salesperson am I how good of stories am I telling, how aggressive am I, so people just want to get rid of, like, there's so many dynamics in that room, and we are truly in way traditional performance management is done, we're relying on that set of people, humans, to advocate for and actually make hard choices about employees, which is inherently so broken.
Oh my God. I could, that was like my second newsletter send ever was performance management doesn't really assess your performance because I really hate performance management to a certain extent. I hate the way it's traditionally done because
Yeah,
I think it's like, it's done in a way that actually doesn't solve any of our real problems.
right.
Like employees want that clarity. And I think like
Mm-hmm.
when we talked about this episode and what we want to talk about, and you were like, employees just really want to know where they stand. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
isn't that the goal of performance management? But somehow everything we do in performance management doesn't actually tell them anything.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I suppose some people do, but for the vast majority,
yeah.
it's you're left with more questions than answers.
And I think a lot of HR people recognize that and are trying to fix it. And I think we'll get into tech later in the episode, but
Yeah.
I think that's like a big focus I know of like a lot of my HR friends. Like, how do you do performance management? How do you do it well? And so
Yeah.
it brings me to this idea of like this episode about employees really wanting to know where they stand, but like, what are they really asking for
Yeah.
when they say they want to know what they stand? Is it
Yeah.
about their ratings or is it actually something deeper?
I mean, I think it's probably much more multidimensional than a rating, but I think a good rating that employees, managers, and leaders can feel like is a reliable assessment of someone is an excellent starting point for performance management because it grounds the conversation in you're a superstar, you're meeting expectations, or we've got development work we need to do quickly, or maybe this isn't the right fit. And like that's a really important grounding. If with confidence you can say that to an employee, you're starting from such a better place than just a whole bunch of words that might talk about examples or feedback, but without that grounding and orientation around like, where am I in the business? What should I expect from the business? All the other stuff turns into noise. So I think a reliable rating is not the end all be all. There's so much more that people want to know. They want to know, are they having an impact? They want to know if they're being seen. They want to know what their development opportunities are. They, of course, want to know what comp is. But it's a really critical starting point for a conversation that's an effective performance management conversation.
I like that thought, the words that you just said, grounding, because I think so many employees, when we talk about employees want to know where they stand, I think so many managers and companies don't do a good job of that level setting grounding as soon as someone starts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, here's a role. How, like, I could name so many countless times in my career where I like took a job and then the actual day to day was so different than what the job description told me I was going to do.
Yep.
How am I supposed to know if I'm doing a good job if it's not even the job I thought I was taking?
Right.
And who's telling me that? Something we do at Work Week that I'm honestly very proud of is we have committed to reviewing job descriptions once a year, where we have every single manager look at their team, look at each of their job descriptions and say, yes, they do this. No, they don't do that. Actually, this needs to change. And it's something we started doing, like, we're small, so like we're able to do this. But I think it's so powerful because we're constantly just like lobbying things at employees all day long to do more and more and more and more. And especially with AI, it's like even more. And I'm like, how do they even know what the level ground is if that is never set, if that baseline is never set, and then imagine it's never discussed?
Yeah. And I think it's made even harder by the fact that, like, as you're saying, roles change and goals change. So we're not living in 1985 where you could set goals, every 6 month goals, and just you're working your way towards those 6 month goals. I mean, the world is so dynamic today that a lot of the traditional rituals that were used to help people understand where they stand are no longer there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel like we could talk about this forever. I think, okay, the one thing I do want to talk about though is like, we're talking a lot about these employees and do they understand like where they stand and how these things are changing. I think one big piece that I always hear about HR people complaining about, and I mean, I say complain lightly, please don't be mad at me if you're listening, is leaders. Because, and you've been a leader, like you've led a company, you've been a CEO, like you know how tough these conversations could be. But what's one thing you think leaders often misunderstand about how performance conversations land with their teams?
I think probably the biggest miss is lack of clarity. I think that it's really easy to not actually be clear because it feels like an easier conversation, but clarity is kindness. And so I feel like the most important principle that leaders can practice is like, what is the clear headline? That if they hear nothing else, they understand this headline. Because I just think it's, as we said at the beginning, feedback is hard. It's not something that we're innately good at, most people. And so the way that typically people overcome that is they just talk in circles and they never quite get to the point. And I think if leaders could probably cut the amount of time they spent giving feedback by a third or a half, 75%, and actually just say, like, what are the two messages that people absolutely need to hear? And let me make sure that they've absolutely heard those messages. And then we can figure out where we go from there.
Yeah. What's that? Okay. I say the Brene Brown quote way too much for someone who has not read all of Brene Brown. Spoiler alert. I read a lot of fiction, not enough nonfiction, but clear is kind. I think clarity is so interesting as a business. Like everyone talks about like business acumen and like soft skills. I'm like, no, all these soft skills are actually hard skills. And one that we have not managed well, I think, is like clarity with people. Because I think a lot of people confuse clarity for being unkind. And I'm like, the Brene Brown quote is like, clear is kind.
Completely.
You can't just talk around things. I'm so worried about like business speak a lot of times. Oh, I'll circle back. Oh, let's double click. I'm like, can we just talk? Can we just talk like real humans? Like I sit my direct report down and I say things like, this really annoyed me about something you did. And like, here's why. Like, let's talk about it. Or here's what you're doing really well. And here's
Yeah.
why I think you're doing it really well.
Love it.
And I just think like clarity is something that we have misconstrued so much in business. Like, let's all be polite and then not actually say the thing. And then it's like, no, but you have to say the thing.
Yeah, and then when choices get made about promotions or people get let go or people get put on performance plans, it's a surprise.
Ugh.
And you wonder why it's a surprise. It's a surprise because no one's been clear up to that point.
Yeah, it has not happened to me very often, but every now and then an employee will come into a PIP conversation and be like, oh my God, I'm
Yeah.
not performing. That's
Yeah.
why when a manager comes to me and they're like, so-and-so's underperforming, I'm like, what feedback have you given them?
Yeah.
And if the answer is they've only given them verbal feedback, nothing in writing,
Yeah.
nothing in like multiple conversations, I always say back to the drawing board for you.
Yeah.
You got to go make it clear that this person is not performing before you come to me and I have to take then more serious actions. So I think like that, I mean, honestly, I could do a whole episodes on being clear with people because it's like so lost. And I
Yeah.
have such a direct style of speaking that like early in my career professionally, people were like, you're too direct.
Mm.
And I remember thinking like, why do you want me to talk around the thing? Don't you
Right.
just want to know?
Right. Can't we save some time here? And angst.
Like, let's cut the bullshit.
Right.
I'm just
The
going to
other
say
thing I
what I'm
think
thinking.
that I see a lot in performance reviews, which is not helpful to anyone, is that people will get a rating, like a bad rating, and then get really glowing feedback.
Explain that to me. Please
Right?
explain that to me. Why does
Talk
that
about how
happen?
confusing for an employee. Talk about not knowing where you stand. Which one do I want to listen to?
The two or
Or
you're
the
so great? It's pretty wild. Okay. So then we just talked about clarity. How do you actually create a culture where it's normal and even expected to actually openly talk about performance and expectations?
not easy. First, it has to be like a really, really critical part of the culture. So you need to have behaviors that clearly illustrate what it looks like to give good feedback and actually reward people on those things. Like visibly, culture is about having expectations and then visibly rewarding people when they actually live into those expectations for behavior, and then visibly rewarding people. That's the way you build culture. And so you can build a feedback culture by being really clear on what are the observable behaviors that a great feedback culture has. And then how can I, as a CEO, how can I, as a CHRO, actively reward those behaviors? So, in town halls and all hands meetings, like giving shout outs to people that are really living in that behavior, over bonusing people that actually like put your money where your mouth is, measure how well people are doing against behaviors, and then reward people financially for living those behaviors. Crazy idea. Everyone wants a a feedback culture, but they don't put any money against it. Like, what if you put money against it? What if you showed people that there really was like benefit? Because I think actually people start to realize the softer benefit, the value of it as an individual over time. But to get over the hump of getting people to do it, like you've got to define it and then you've got to reward it in visible ways so people know it's what's expected.
It's so funny. Like, maybe I should start a poll and just ask my friends, like, how many of you have performance conversations at work with your managers and stuff? Because it's so interesting when people say, oh, we want to build a high performing culture. And then when you ask them about like their day to day or their month to month, week to week, and they only talk about performance like twice a year.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you expect to do that if you only talk about it twice a year? It has to be like in your DNA or it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. And I think people also overlook the critical role that leaders play in building that culture by visibly rewarding it, because people do what gets rewarded. And oftentimes I think leaders are not as intentional about what they reward as they could be. And so they kind of almost subconsciously reward stuff that they don't want actually people to be doing. And they don't visibly reward the things that the hard stuff that they really want people to do.
Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like if leaders talked about their performance more, just It would be such an unlock to like destigmatize it. Like I talk about my performance review with my direct report. So like we did her performance review and then I wrapped up and I was like, okay, can I share, like you gave me upward feedback and I got downward feedback. Can I share that so I can figure out where the gaps are so I can be a better leader for you?
I love it. When I started this job, the hiring team interviewed 10 references of mine. 10.
Wow.
That's a lot. They were serious about it. I'm glad I got the job.
10.
10 references. And then they actually did this really interesting thing. They fed it all into AI and they had AI create a synopsis for me and I actually found that synopsis of who I was to be the most factual and resonated with me more than anything I've ever gotten before. And I think it's because it wasn't judgmental. It was like just very factual.
Yeah.
But when I got the job, I took that and I shared it with all the people. I shared it with the whole company because I was like, you all need to know what you're getting here. You can see the good and you can see where I'm going to have problems. And I'm going to need your help where I have problems.
Yeah.
Because, we're a team and like work is the ultimate team sport.
Yes.
And if you think about the way really good teams work, they are giving each other feedback all the time and they are so open about their development areas.
Yeah. That's like, you're so vulnerable in that action as something that I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about is their performance. In my last job, when I was interviewing, I said, why don't I just send you my last 3 performance reviews? And I sent them, I was like, you should know also what you're getting into. I feel like I've had a lot of privilege to be able to do that. But I think there's something like really powerful about saying as a leader, like, here's how my performance is also being assessed.
Yeah.
And it creates that culture of, okay, it's not abnormal to talk about performance,
Right.
which is like what employees so desperately want. But we've somehow made it this like black box of you don't get to know anything until you have a review, which is where I feel like a lot of people have just really messed up and could change that so much by just like openly sharing about their performance.
I think it also, not to belabor the topic here, but I think it also, by doing that, just reassures people that no one's perfect. And actually the way that companies win is by acknowledging that we're all good at some things and not good at other things. And it is the combination of all of those different skill sets when you get the right people in the room working together well, that's how you win. Not because one person is this amazing human, superhuman.
It's wild. I'm like, I will tell you first about my imperfections before I tell you what I'm good at, because I think that just like explains a lot about who I am and how I show up. And so I think, I mean, you're right. We're really belaboring this point, but I think it's important for people to hear it's okay to not be this like, we're not machines.
Right.
We are humans. And I think a piece of performance management that is really interesting to me is I feel like we tried to create a system to assess people and really set this standard of like, you have to be perfect. And we forgot that like the goal is you have to be someone who's open to growing. Like that's what I think the goal of performance management should be, is like, how can we help you grow? What can we tell you about yourself that you might not know or observe? Yeah. What can your peers share about you? So there's power to performance management, but I think often it's just deployed incorrectly, which you and I have talked about quite a bit.
Yeah.
We've all had those head scratcher moments like, why did our star player just bail? Or who messed up payroll again? Yeah, those could have been dodged with a little help from Lattice. It's the all-in-one HR platform designed to power performance and stop HR regrets in their tracks. No need to sacrifice a solid tech stack for top-notch people programs. With Lattice, you get both. Ready to leave those regrets in the dust? Check out Lattice at lattice.com/no regrets. Swing by lattice.com/no regrets. Is it just me, or does multi-state HR compliance feel impossible to keep up with? 650 is here to help. With 650, you can generate handbooks, hiring paperwork, separation agreements, and more that's compliant in all 50 states. As laws change, your documents update automatically. Consider it your secret weapon for staying compliant without losing your mind. And with 650 AI, you can ask employment law questions in your own words and get quick, reliable answers without all the legalese. No more hunting down state law information, no more outdated policies, just peace of mind. Visit 650, SIXFIFTY.com to see why HR teams love 650. That's 650.com. And I think this is like a great segue to my tech question. Like, you're building something at Encompass Labs to help solve this. Can you share a bit about what gap that you're trying to fill and why this gap exists and matters?
So what we're really trying to do, we're an AI native performance management platform. And what we're really trying to do is not remove the human. I want to be really, really clear about this because I have a incredibly strong philosophical belief that humans cannot be removed from performance management. But humans spend a whole bunch of time in the stuff of performance management that we're not actually that good at. And so we are using technology to make ratings less biased. We're using technology to help people write better qualitative feedback. We're using technology to auto-calibrate a whole organization. So can we get the ball to the 70-yard line so that the last 30 yards humans can take us home and they can bring their judgment and bring their experience and bring their wisdom to the conversation, but we don't soak up so much time on the actual work of the inputting and the that work up front that we're not actually that good at. Let's not soak up the time at that. Let's save that time for the end part of the making sense of it and figuring out what to do with it. And I think today getting to the inputs to a form that we can do something with takes 90% of our effort. And by the time we get to making sense of it and figuring out what to do with it, we're exhausted and we're over it.
Yep.
So what if we could just start at the 70-yard line and take it home?
There's just, I think of performance management. One time I had a team of 8 people and it would take me 2 weeks to write their reviews.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's before you did anything about them even.
And we did quarterly reviews then.
It's craziness.
Literally, I think it was the last week of every quarter. I was like, there goes my productivity because I'm just going to be writing 8 reviews. You can really tell the difference between the first review I wrote and the 8th review I wrote. And then I started prioritizing them to write my top performers first so I could give them more attention when really that was not a good idea. And I would just burn my energy before I even had the conversation. You're right.
So I'll give you a couple snippets and things that we're really trying to break the rules on perform where things are broken. How can we do it differently? So first example is, tradition. So we have a 360 at the cornerstone of our platform is a 360 because I just feel the way we work today, manager only is just, it never worked and it really doesn't work anymore. So everyone gets a 360, which feels overwhelming when you think about traditional 360, how the hell could you do that? But it's a super fast input, data science, AI enabled input so that you actually can run a 360 for a whole organization. The first step in it is I get to choose who I want to give a review to, not who gives me a review. So let me just say it again. So I don't go in and pick who's going to give me a review. I go in and pick who have I worked with a lot that I have feedback to give to. That's a big difference.
Question. What if I'm afraid to pick the person I really want to give feedback to?
It's anonymous, so you don't need to be afraid.
I'd be giving feedback to everybody. I feel what's
really interesting, though, is we find that scores are much more balanced, as you would imagine, because you're getting a range of feedback from people that have worked with you.
Yeah.
And we find that people give a lot more feedback because they're actually picking the people that they have something to say about, instead of that dreaded feeling when you open up, oh my God, who are all the people who've asked for feedback from me? And half these people I actually don't have anything to say about.
Or they're just your friend and you want to say something nice to them.
Right. And then the other thing that I'll say that's a big difference is we actually have you review everybody at the same time. So we have the 360 is based on behaviors and you review everybody on each behavior simultaneously.
Oh my God. So you're stack ranking your people in your head as you're answering the question?
So, you're giving everyone a rating, and it's a relative rating. We are not trying to drive stack ranking, but you do get a ranking out of it. And the truth of the matter is that behaviors are fully relative.
Yeah.
anytime you're giving somebody a rating, you're thinking about like, who does this well, who does this badly, where does this person fall in between that? So this is just acknowledging that
Yeah.
and allowing you actually to give a more reliable rating by looking at everyone at one time. I'm sure you've done this before. I get to like review number 3 and I'm like, oh, I gave that person a 4. I need to go back to review number 1 and like go back and change what I did on review number 1.
Yep.
So this is just owning the fact that this is a relative thing. So we should just rate we have sliders. You rate everyone at the same time. And it's like, quick.
Love that. And do you find that the data tends to be a bell curve? Like you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
Ratings are so subjective. Like
Yes.
what is your take on ratings need to be a bell curve? Everyone rates too high. Everyone rates too hard. Like how do you actually calibrate a grader in all of this?
Yeah. So it's not necessarily a bell curve that you get out of it, even though, I suppose you could force it into a bell curve, but it's not necessarily the way it falls out. But we do have founders of the company are PhD statisticians from the Wharton School, and they've written like a series of algorithms that moves a rating from a simple average to actually a rating that's contextualized in the entire data set of the company. So if I get lucky and get a bunch of high graders and you get unlucky and get a whole bunch of low graders, that is worked out. The algorithm helps to normalize for those very real biases that everyone brings to giving ratings.
I feel like I could do a whole episode on ratings and what ratings mean, honestly, because I think about that so often. Like, I mean, you're building something that's really cool and is trying to solve this problem, but what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make when like implementing a performance management software like this?
I think it's not being clear on what they're trying to solve for.
Story of my life.
What's the problem? Because again, we might be the right solution for some companies. It might not be the right solution. What's the problem you're trying to solve for? And get super clear on that and super clear on what does success look like? And then use that context in selecting the right partner. Don't go out and see like a bunch of demos and see what's cool and then try and like force fit something that you think is cool into your situation.
Because it might not work.
Probably won't.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because so often I'm like, what's the problem we're trying to solve here?
Right.
Like if someone can't answer, like when someone comes to me like, I have a great idea, let's do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And my first question is always, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? And if they can't articulate the problem, I'm like, please leave me alone.
Go back and write the problem down.
Not a task I will be focused on at all. If you can't tell me that this, if I'm just doing work to do work, no, thank you. I have all this other work I have to do that is actually problem solving that is not this. So I love that too, because you're right. Like every performance management software solution is not going to be right for everyone. And a lot of companies actually, like bigger companies, I think have homegrown and built their own internal performance management. And it's just, I think people jump to like let's do a performance management process when I'm like, let's look at first, how do we set feedback? So we didn't even do, I think my first year at Workweek, one of the earliest things we did was implement like feedback Fridays, where I was just trying to get people in the habit of giving feedback every 2 weeks. After we did that for 6 months, I was like, we're going to build a habit. After we had done that for 6 months, I was like, okay, we could be ready to do a review. How do you all feel about it? Like, what are we actually trying to learn here? What problem are we really trying to solve? And a lot of it was like the employees just wanted to know they were doing a good job. Mm-hmm. And this comes back to like our whole theme of employees just want to know where they stand.
Yeah.
But like, it scares me if people jump to performance management as like the solution to telling them, where I'm like, start with giving them feedback. Mm-hmm. And if that works and you're starting to do it really well, then it's like, cool. Now who else can give them feedback?
Yeah.
Like who else across the org?
Yeah. And by the way, performance management is just like the first step. If you don't actually then have a effective way of providing the feedback and then doing something about it, like don't do performance management, because talk about a good way to drive disengagement.
Yeah.
Like asking people to do a whole bunch of work on something that never, and then nothing ever changes.
Yeah. That's how I feel about pulse surveys. So we also run pulse surveys regularly, and I'm going out and we've run them now each set twice. So probably like next month, I'll go to the employees and say, here's what we learned from the pulse surveys. Mm-hmm. Here's what we want to do. Are you all aligned or not? Because I'm like, there's nothing worse than, can you imagine like being a top performer, taking your time to fill out a performance review, talking about all the ways you add value to the company, rolling into your performance review and nothing happens afterwards. There's no growth path for you. There's no talk about how do we level you up. There's no talk about a performance or a promotion plan. Nothing. I would turn off so fast. I'd be like, see ya.
Yeah. But again, when you think about performance management and you're relying on like single people, single managers to be the conduit into the business, it's back to where I started with employees know who the top performers are and who the low performers are. If you go through performance management and nothing changes, like top performers don't get recognized, low performers don't get moved out, like it, even worse than doing nothing at all.
Yeah, my CEO and I talk about that a lot too. We're like, if you are putting people on notice with like not giving them good feedback and not good reviews, like that's just an indication for us too. Like we need to go do something then too. I love to wrap every episode with like a little bit of future thinking and advice giving. You know, I can't get away from the fact that I love giving advice. It's like my favorite pastime. If you could wave a magic wand, I wish, and redesign performance management from scratch, what's one thing you would get rid of immediately and one thing you might actually keep?
So I think what I would get rid of immediately is the process heavy inputs. Like I said earlier, like the exhaustion that comes from doing all of the work of gathering the inputs. And so then you've got no energy left to do anything about it. So I would get rid of that immediately. I think the things I would keep are, I keep the ritual of calibration, but using reliable data. Because again, it is the grounding for people. Like people need to know company wants to know where people stand and people want to know where they stand. So I would keep the ritual of calibration to see if I could make it more reliable and more data driven. And I would continue to make time for those conversations with employees. Because again, if you're not closing the loop in a clear, kind way, why bother doing it at all?
That's a mic drop moment right there. But I still have one more question.
All right, one more.
I love a little like a prediction moment. So, what is your bold prediction for the future of performance management? Like, what could actually change in the next 5 years?
Can I tell you first what I hope doesn't change?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hope that humans don't get totally written out of performance management. So just fresh off of Transform, and we have we are AI native, like a lot of AI in what we do.
Yeah.
But fresh off of Transform, like there's just so much hope for all the things that AI is going to take over. And I think we miss something really critical if humans get taken out of performance management altogether. So I'll tell you what I hope doesn't change. What I think will change, I do think some of the innate weaknesses of humans can be overcome with technology.
I love
that. So
keeping
the humans, but just try and make it a little easier for us to be successful.
I love that. I think that's like there's this, I can't remember what company it was. I just read this article. They were getting rid of their chief people officer and they were looking to maybe add a chief performance officer or something where like the sole purpose of the job would be like focused on performance. I can't remember where I read this and maybe I made this up in a fever dream, but I think about that so much because this episode is just 1 hour of us talking about performance management, but it could be a full-time job.
Yeah.
Think about what does it mean to enable our employees to do great work. And I think there will always be performance management systems that can aid that. But I love that you talk about that the human never leaves it. Like if we are designing systems for just repetitive action and no thought, what are we doing?
Yeah, and I hope also, just to stay on that topic, I hope that as technology can replace some of the grunt work that we do today, I hope that we don't fill that time up with other stuff, but actually can leave that time available to develop people, to create high-performing teams, to do the things that actually make companies and cultures strong and employees engaged.
Yeah, I don't want to be very clear, I'm not trying to do more work. Right. I want to do better work.
Right, exactly.
Like I want to take the 8 hours it used to take me to write a review. It does not take me 8 hours now. I have one direct report. But like when I had a team at 8, it took me a week. I would take that week. What if I didn't have to spend all that time writing? I only had to spend maybe 5 or 6 hours writing because the inputs are already there. I've been giving continual feedback. And I could actually spend the time with my remaining rest of the week thinking about how do I develop these people? how do I give them the feedback they need? What are their gaps? And I think that's just the piece that really is missing. Is I think the AI conversation that really bugs me is, oh, well, now you can do more work. And I want to be like, no, but I just want to do better work.
Right. And it comes into, there's performance management required to change that though also, because I think we're so programmed all just to like work, to be very reactive. And a lot of the work that we should be doing, if we could free some time up, is much more proactive work, which is a different muscle than the muscle that gets developed in this like crazy, high charging, fast paced world we live in.
Yeah. And I think the proactive muscle is the hardest one to build.
For
Reactive
sure.
is easy. You can like in the moment figure it out. Proactive though, strategic thought, thinking about what does the future look like? What's the game plan? That is what I think a lot of people also struggle with. So it's going to be interesting to watch the world of work in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm actually excited that I have this job.
I think you should be. It's such an. I think it's a really exciting time. I'm psyched.
Excited to have this job. You know, it's a great way to end this podcast. No, I do. I love it, and I like my dream would be to be like a performance focused chief people officer. Like right now, I like split my attention between like recruiting and engagement and performance. Like I think my sweet spot, because I started my career in L&D, I'm always thinking about how do we grow these people? What is the structure we need to have in place? How do we get better feedback? Like, can I jump in and teach someone how to do this better? That to me is exciting. I think like chief people officers, like for so long, we've talked about the CFO being the path to the CEO. And I've always talked about how I think CPO, like chief people officers, could also be excellent CEOs because they're trying to drive the performance of the most important asset at any company, the people.
For sure.
I'm excited. I'm refreshed and excited.
And I really do think as CPOs try to make that leap and really build that relationship with the CEO, the more data they can bring to the conversation, the more the CEOs are going to pay attention. That's why the CFO has all the attention. They've got all that damn data.
Yeah. But we have also really good data too.
Good. Use it.
You just got to know how to talk about it. Yeah,
exactly.
That's such a good point. The CFO does historically have the most amount of data, but like we do too.
When you have really critical data, I think it's like, how do you make it quantitative and reliable so you can go in boldly and make statements about your talent that feel actionable and confident?
I love it. That's a brilliant place to end this episode. I just have to say thank you. First of all, every conversation with you, I learned something new. I'd like to just say that.
Right back at you.
From our very first conversation to meeting in person to even this, you've given me a lot of food for thought about calibration, how we let people pick who reviews them. I'm going to really be thinking about what can I do to step up our performance management to like really help employees at their core understand where they stand in the workplace. Yeah. Because that's all we all really want is some clarity.
That's all you want. If you want more, you want better employee engagement, help your employees know where they stand. If they know where they stand, they're either going to opt out or they're going to be into it.
Yeah. Let's hope they opt in. Actually, no, I lied. Let's hope they opt out. I want people to self-select out if they don't want to be there.
I think both are really valuable. Like if it's not the right fit, like help people to know that and know it sooner than later.
Yeah, before we waste our time. It's like a bad relationship. Get out of it early before you end up married. Or worse. I don't know, just dating for a long time. I don't know. Anyways, this has been such a fun time. In the show notes, I'll have all your information for people to get in touch with you. But if somebody really wants to reach out after this episode, what's the best way? Like what's your most responsive way for people to reach out to you?
Jessica at encompasslabs.com.
Love it. Okay.
Jessica at encompass-labs.com. Sorry.
I was going to say, make sure the dash is in there. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I love it so much. And I can't wait to see where the future of performance management goes.
Thank you. You are a great host.
You're the best.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.